Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Arkansas Science Festival. I am Dr. Karen Yanowitz, and I'm joined here today by Sergeant Traci Simpson of the Arkansas State University Police Force, and she is going to tell us about crime scene processing and fingerprints, and then we'll do an activity where we'll actually try to take our own fingerprints. So Traci, you want to take it away?
Awesome. I'm Sergeant Traci Simpson, and this is something that I'm really excited about to show you today, because to me it's kind of like going to a crime scene. It's like putting a puzzle, together. You take pieces, you put it together to solve, whatever has happened. So today I'm going to demonstrate 2 ways that we lift fingerprints at crime scenes. So let's put our imagination hats on and pretend that we walked into this room that I'm standing in, and we are going to start looking for evidence. And one of the things that we're going to look for today is fingerprints. And we will do this by pretending that this is a wall, this white sheet here, and we're going to see if there's fingerprints on it. And one way that you may see on TV is that some of the investigators has a flashlight, very bright light, and you see them kind of shining around. And what they're looking for is evidence like fingerprints. You might hear it called Latin prints, but they're looking for that. They're looking for hair fibers, carpet fibers, anything that's left behind by human or animal. So let's see if we can find some fingerprints. Not quite sure, which of course it's very white. My light is bright. So we're going to dust that just to see, because there's a chance there might be fingerprints there. But also here's a glass on the table. And so we're going to look, and of course, we'll have gloves on. I see something right there that looks kind of like a fingerprint. So let's lift them. See if we can lift them. I'm going to go ahead and put my gloves on since I didn't do that to start with. So there's 2 ways that we can lift prints. It's very messy. So as you see on TV, they're all dressed up in white pants or white tops, and they never get fingerprint dust on them. That's TV, that's Hollywood. So it's going to be messy. So one way we're going to do on here is we have 2 different types of fingerprint. Take the lid off of this. Fingerprint, what we call dust. Okay, this one's just a regular kind of fine. It's kind of hard to see. But on this one, this fine dust, we use a kind of like a really feather lightweight brush. And it doesn't take much. I'm just going to get it off the lid. Inside the lid. Okay, does not take much. And what we're going to do, we're going to use a twirling motion with our brush. So let's start up at the top and just kind of twirl. I don't know if you can see this yet. I will bring it closer to the camera. Okay, I'm starting to see some fingerprints. Let's go ahead and bring this closer to the camera. Can you see some prints right there? Okay, let's keep dusting because that's a lot of prints on this section of the wall. Okay, so what we're seeing here is you can see like 3 really good fingerprints there. You can see one here. So this looks like the pinky. So it looks like this might be a handprint that was like this. Maybe they leaned against the wall because they were bending over, or maybe they tripped and they put their hand up to stop them from falling. So not only do we have some fingerprints here, but we also have kind of a palm print. And did you not know not only your fingerprints and palm prints can be left behind, but if you're barefooted, you have prints on your toes and you have prints on the sole of your feet. So this is one way that we lift fingerprints. Now with this being pretending it's a wall, what we would do is after we dust it, we will take a picture of it, a digital picture, and we can send that in. We can also cut out this section of the wall and send this section of the wall into the lab. The crime lab is in Little Rock, so that's where we send a lot of our evidence to. We don't send it through the mail. We personally take it down there ourselves, but we package it a certain way. And maybe one day we can talk about how we package evidence. So that's one way we can lift these fingerprints. Another way is a little bit different. Okay, so remember I said a while ago, I could see some fingerprints. I don't know if you can see them, not a very good way, but I see 1, 2, 3. I see about 3 prints on there. So let's see if we can lift these prints off of this glass. Okay, so another way or another dust that we have is called magnetic dust. And it's a little bit heavier in density than the regular dust is. This one, we use it's not a feather. In fact, it's magnetic. So it kind of attaches to metal. So let me show you how this looks. And so this is how this powder looks. Go ahead and tap some of that off. And so it's going to stay on this, what I call wand, until I release it. And releasing it would be just pulling this up a little bit. See how it's falling off? Okay, so let's get it back on here and dust it. And depending on the texture of like the wall, glass is a little bit slippier than the wall. So depending on the texture of what you're having to lift the fingerprint from is the type of material you're going to use. Okay, so normally I would leave this sitting on the countertop until I lift the dust, but since we're having to do this close to the camera, I'm going to hold it up like this. And basically this is almost the same as doing the powder. You just lightly touch, kind of rake it across. See, they're starting to, I don't know if you can see that, kind of hard to. Let me see if I put some paper towel in it, if that will help. Okay, let's see, maybe, sorry, I know it's kind of hard, but we'll brush it, see if I can make it darker. And you want to do this very lightly. Oh, there's one you can see.
Yeah, you can see that for sure.
So you want to do this very lightly. You don't want to do it really fast. You don't want to press on it really hard, because what's going to happen when you do that is you're going to smear it. You're going to smudge the print, and then it's not any good. So now that we've got this dusted, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm not going to do the whole glass. Even if there's something on the glass like words, letters, or anything like that, you can still dust over it. There are different colors of fingerprint dust. They're not always black. We do have a bright pink. I didn't think about getting that now. So now that we've got this dusted, how do we get this off the glass for me to send to the lab? Because I can package this, but then we take a chance of it getting broken. So say we don't take a picture of it. How we are going to lift that now is we have a special tape that we use to lift, but I'm just going to use regular packing tape. And so what we do is I can pretty much, I've got a piece here that's going to cover at least 2 of those prints. So I want to kind of roll it up there on it. Once again, you don't want to smear it, the fingerprint. Once I've got it covered with tape, then I can take my finger and I can move it across it because the tape is protecting it. I can also take this off. I should have got it out before I did this. So we got a card, and maybe, I'm worried about the tape not getting down in the grooves, or what we call the friction. That's what causes fingerprints from your fingers onto surfaces. I can take a credit card, debit card, or just some kind of card and rake over the tape, because I want to make sure that I'm getting that fingerprint really good, getting that tape stuck on it. Once again, the tape is over the fingerprint, so it's not smudging it or smearing it. Once I get that done and I feel like it's good to go, I'm going to slowly pull the tape down, and you can see, without touching the tape, getting my fingerprints, you can see the fingerprints on there. And we have these special cards that's basically for fingerprinting. One side is blank, no lines, no words. And I'm going to stick that tape to that card. Okay, once again, the fingerprints are protected by the tape. Once I get them stuck to this card on the back, and normally we will fill this out before we put the tape on there, but it asks for like the case number. Every time we go to a crime scene, we get a case number, the date and time of the time that the crime supposedly happened, type of offense, like let's call this a break-in, a theft, location, victim's name, if we have a victim, whoever lives here, we put their name on it. We put the, excuse me, we draw, we have a section over here where we have to draw. So on this, what I would basically draw is kind of a cup. And then I would put a little asterisk of where on that cup that I lifted those prints. So that way, I took a picture of this. I'm sending the photos in with this, so that if they print up the picture, they see the glass setting this way, and they could take this drawing and just kind of move it over in front of that glass and be like, oh yeah, she removed them right there. So that's two ways that we can, lift fingerprints. Fingerprints, not everybody may have fingerprints on file with the crime lab. For example, I do, because I'm a law enforcement officer, so we have to be fingerprinted when we start in this line of work, as well as people like teachers, health professions, and stuff like that. That's the only way that my prints are in the database. The other way that your fingerprints can be put in the database is if you committed a crime and you were caught, you were fingerprinted, and therefore your fingerprints are going to be in the database. So say, for example, we run these prints, the crime lab runs these prints, and they get what we call a hit. And so they look, and this person's name that might have gotten put in the database because maybe they did a break and entering, before this. So that's how we can catch them. I'll show you one of our machines that we've got here. Make sure my cut's out of the way. Is if, for example, we have a new officer that starts with our department. We can fingerprint here at our office. We also fingerprint teachers, health professions, people like that. They come here and we do what is called an Inkless fingerprinting. So they get a card, they have a fingerprint card. And so what we do is, even though this is Inkless, see if I can get it out and show you. This is what the ink pad looks like, okay? So we're gonna do one of my thumbs. I put my right thumb on there, and if you'll see, you really don't see no ink or anything on my thumb. It's a little red. So then I take it and I find the box where that fingerprint will go. And this is my right one, so it's going to go in this box right here. Okay. You see red. I did my left one a while ago. You see where I did my right one. Okay, they're red. So now I'm going to take them and I'm going to slip that card underneath there. Let me put the lid back on. And I'm going to turn it on. The blue light comes on. That was inkless, okay? Nothing on my thumbs. They're just a little red. And so how is that going to be where I send it to the crime lab? How is that going to show up to them? Well, it's what we call baking, okay? So it takes just a few minutes. It should be done just any moment. And remember, it was red when I put it in there. Let's see. Oh, still baking.
Well, that's
Push it up.
baking away.
Baking away.
How long did it take you to learn how to take fingerprints?
We do, when we go to the police academy, we send our officers to the police academy if they're not already certified. They're at the police academy. We spent like a whole week on nothing but fingerprinting, on how to look for them, how to lift them, how to package them, how to send them to the crime lab. And they gave us all kinds of materials that we had to practice on. For example, I practice on walls, I practice on vehicles, I practice on cabinets. We even had to practice on handles. Those are hard to do. We've had to practice on all kinds of cups, glass, plastic, the red Solo cups. We've had to practice on cans, like cans of soda or cans of food. We've also had to practice on trying to lift them on car tires, wheels, and that's kind of hard to do. All right, so it just went off. So now there's my fingerprints. So this is what we do, and we send those in, or the person that needed to be fingerprinted for their job, we'll send those in to Little Rock to the lab, and then they will be scanned in and they will be put on file. And that's part of the background check on people that are trying to get jobs.
That's great. Who knew that there were so many different ways that you could take fingerprints. Now
it's hard, especially in the wintertime on vehicles. Sometimes it's really hard when the weather outside is really cold. That's why we have different techniques of lifting fingerprints. For example, on this one, I use the magnetic dusting, but let's do a fingerprint here. Okay, let me get some oil build up. Okay, there wasn't nothing there. So let's use this brush, see how it does. Because glass is a little bit more slippier so you want a dust that will pick it up. Okay, so there's that one. Let's see if we can get it. So there's that one. Okay, that one was done by the fine dust. These over here was done by the magnetic. So you have to really know your materials and what dust will be better for that material, because once I dust over this print with that fine dust, that's it. I can't go and say, well, that didn't come out good. Let's try this one now and dust over that. If I do that, it's going to mess up the fingerprint. So it's really important to know your material that you're printing and what dust and what technique is going to be the best way to do it.
A lot of science involved in trying to figure out which works where, and like you said, problem solving. That's all part of approaching the world in a scientific manner, right?
Yes, it is. And and we practice. Depending on how busy you are, if we have a lot of thefts and stuff, that keeps us up on current on our techniques. But if it's been a while since an officer has lifted fingerprints, we encourage them to practice it, because like I said, you only get one shot to lift that, and you don't want to mess up that one shot.
Right. Well, that's great. I mean, I certainly learned a lot, and I think everybody who's watching definitely will. we'll have. So now I'm going to show you a PowerPoint, what some of these fingerprints look like close up, and then we'll walk through. So basically you can do exactly what Sergeant Simpson did it with at home with baby powder and stuff. It won't come out as nicely as hers did, but it'll give you at least a sense of what they look like.
And you don't have to have a fancy, fingerprint card to do it on. We have some of these, but when we run out and we're waiting for some more to come in, we just use Plano index cards. It's the same way, one side of it's blank, so you can put your drawing on this side, and and tape the fingerprint on that side, and then on this side do your drawing and write your information in. So you don't have to have really fancy cards like this. Just everyday index cards work. Regular packing tape works. You want it to be clear. You want to be able to see through it. And two, if you're just curious at what your fingerprints look like, just take some tape, put your finger on the sticky side, pull it away, and you can see what your fingerprints look like. Because sometimes, your fingerprints, especially this time of year when it's cold weather and your hands are really dry, because it takes oil from your body to leave those ridges behind. Sweat's a good way that leaves ridges behind. So, if you're just curious what your fingerprints look like, that's one way you can look at it as well.
All right, great. Well, that's going to be probably easier than what I'm going to talk about, which is using a stamp pad. Less messy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us. I think this is great. And like I said, so I'm going to think Sergeant Simpson's going to sign off, and then I'm going to show you a quick PowerPoint, and I'll show some pictures of what I try to do at home, and we'll see what they look like.
And you'll just have fun with it. Have fun putting your puzzle together.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, so as we saw, using fingerprints for ID, and as Sergeant Simpson said, our fingerprints are all unique. Even identical twins don't have the same fingerprints, and everything that we touch, we leave fingerprints on. And in fact, Sergeant Simpson used the term latent, so when you can't see them directly, so the visible would be when our fingers are dirty or oily. If you've ever eaten maybe some chocolate and you got something on your hand and you touch something, that's a visible fingerprint. And latent is when you've got a dust for that. So on this video, and again, I really hope that you will make some fingerprints for yourself. So you can go back and watch it and pause it so you can really see these different patterns. There are lots of different patterns of fingerprints. So we've got arches, whorls, loops, simple loops. And here's a really great slide. So if you do take your fingerprints, you can really study this and see how you can classify yourself by it. And they differ in how common they are. So for example, the whorl, 35% of fingerprints have. The loop, that is the highest number. So 65% of people have a loop. So that's pretty common. So you see the loop here is pretty common versus the whorl is pretty uncommon. The most uncommon is this arch. Only 5% of fingerprints have that. So you can look at your own fingerprints and look at the fingerprints of people in your house, and you can see, are there any common, who has something more uncommon? So the first thing you would do, so the crime lab, so as Sergeant Simpson said, then she would send those prints to the crime lab, and then that's where they really analyze them. And those crime lab people have degrees in science, so that's where they're really coming from. So after they identify the common patterns like the loops, the arches, and so forth, then they look for all the individual differences. and that's called minutia. So like we said, everybody has a unique fingerprint. So there are tons of tiny little individual differences that you would look for. And here is a picture again of some of those individual differences. And you can see they're pretty subtle and they're pretty tiny. So you really need that training. You need the training to lift the fingerprints, but you also need the training on how to read the fingerprints. Now, as Sergeant Simpson said, if you take a fingerprint from a crime scene, in order to say, oh, that's that person, your suspect, they have to have their fingerprints in the system. Or you have to have them in custody and you take their fingerprints and then you compare it. So you have an unknown fingerprint and you compare it to a known sample. And as you said, they are scanned into these databases called AFIS, which is kept by the FBI. There's over 2 million fingerprints in this database. So that is a lot of people who have their fingerprints. As you said, you can go to the police department to get your fingers printed. Well, teachers have to do that. Lots and lots of jobs have to do that these days. They're also used a lot in security. So if you have a computer or a phone, or your parents have one that you put your finger on to open it, that is reading your fingerprint. There are palm print readers. So you may have seen those on TV. We have some at Arkansas State University for very highly secured areas where you have to put your whole hand on a palm reader and it reads your palm and your fingerprints, and then it decides, are you allowed to go into the building or not? So fingerprinting is used in a wide variety of different places. So let's talk a little bit. So this is my fingerprint. Let's talk a little bit about how to do this if you want to do your own fingerprinting. If you have a stamp pad, it's very easy. So if you have a stamp pad, all you need to do is take your finger and put it sort of firmly onto the stamp pad. And you saw Sergeant Simpson doing that. If you don't, that's no problem. This wasn't a stamp pad. This is paint. So probably most of you have paint at home. I would use washable paint so you can wash it off pretty easily. So just take paint and just a little bit of water to thin it out a little bit. And just again, roll your finger in the paint. You don't want to get too much paint on it, then it comes out to be just sort of a smear. You can't really see anything. It took me a little while. It takes some practice. Don't expect it to be perfect on the first time. What I did, what the best fingerprint, which this one was, is I put paint on my finger. I put it down on paper. That one came out very smeary. And then I just did it again without putting more paint on. And it was sort of perfect. This is a enlarged picture. So if you have a magnifying glass, you can look at it under your magnifying glass. You can take a picture of it. There are even apps, if you've got, a phone or an iPad or something like that, that will magnify. So just look for magnifying apps, which is what this one was. So it gives you a pretty good amount of detail. So it's fun to do your own prints. This way you can save it if you take a picture of it. And like I said, print some people in your family, see if you've got any commonality, see if you can identify, go back and look at the slide with the different types, see if you can find those whorls or arches and so forth. Now the later print is actually harder to do. So she made it look so easy. So I try to do it at home as well. Now, obviously we don't have at home that lovely feather brush or the magnetic powder, but again, you can do this with things that you've got in your house. So I put my fingers on a bottle here. And what helps, as you saw when she was like rubbing her head, if you put like a little lotion or Vaseline or something like that, it'll help the print come out. So again, hold on to your glass and put your prints on. And then what I found best was cornstarch. So you want something very fine and light. If you don't have cornstarch, you can try baby powder, I tried cocoa. That was a little heavier. What gave the best print for me was something very, very fine like cornstarch. And then I dusted the bottle, and you can see here the fingerprints came up really very clearly. You want to use a very soft brush. So again, I don't have a professional fingerprinting brush at home, but what I did have was a makeup brush. So you want to use a very soft brush. You can use a paintbrush if you have. That's a little harder. That didn't work out as well for me. So see, the softest, sort of fluffiest brush you have in your house, you can use that. And then exactly like she did, I took a piece of packing tape and I just rolled it on very slowly and carefully on the bottle. So you saw what that looked like. It was exactly what I did. And pulled it off. If you're using white powder, it's easier to see if you put it on a dark paper. You can't really see the details of the arches in the picture, but it came out beautifully. So if you do this at home, if you look at it, I think you will be able to see it. And if you really sort of get into it, again, it just uses just a little bit of powder. So I didn't say, I put the powder on a paper plate and then just lightly, barely even just sort of tapped it on, just almost blew it on. And then just use the brush to sort of very, very, very gently scatter it. If you use too much pressure, you'll destroy the ridges that are made from the oil. So just super, super light touch. So if you do this and it works and you like to do it and you see that it's looking good, what you could really do, your last step, if you want to, is see, can you identify somebody's fingerprint? So the way you would do this is have two people in your house take their fingerprints. So you would know that, let's say it's your mom and dad. You would know that this fingerprint is from mom, this fingerprint is from dad. So you can do it with like the stamp pad. Then have one of them, and they don't tell you, put a fingerprint on a glass. So it could be like, I use the bottle. You could use any type of, hard, a glass. You can use a jar of pickles. I mean, anything like that. So again, you don't know who did it. Dust their fingerprints and see if you can compare it and figure out who was the one who held that glass. It's hard. You might not be able to do it, so don't get discouraged, but it'll be fun to try. So I hope you do some fingerprinting at home. I hope you enjoyed this and visit and watch some of the other videos and have a fun day of science. That will be it.